has been so long since my last video, and that's because a little something called life has been happening for the past month that has basically kept me off the garden video scene. But I am back today and am going to show you what is going on right now in the end of August garden and how I'm preparing to move forward into the September and fall garden. Hi, my name's Landon Gilfillan with Pepper and Pine Garden Design, and I love gardening. Gardening is something I've done my whole life, but I really launched into real serious fruit and vegetable gardening at the beginning of my marriage 14, almost 15 years ago. And every year it's grown since, and I've been trying new things and getting better at my craft. Some years are better than others when it comes to specific fruits and vegetables. And I feel like every year I learn something new and continue to progress in the art of gardening. My goal here at Pepper and Pine Garden Design is to encourage gardeners, to encourage them to get going no matter where they are on the learning scale or the experience scale, to find the joy in gardening, especially amidst any sort of fails that happen, because they do happen on the garden scene, even for someone like me that's been doing it for years. And I'm going to share a few of those in this video. I'm also going to share a few wins that I've had and how I plan to move forward here in the next month. Now, if you've been following me at all this past season, you know some of the things that I've been working on, some new things that I've tried this year. And right behind me is one of those, what would you call them, experiments. Actually, 3 of my experiments are all right behind me here. I have over on the left, my left, your right, not really sure, my 3 sisters garden that I had over here. Then moving this way, as you can see, I had the cut sunflower or cut flower garden here behind me. And then right here, the watermelon patch that I decided to try growing at the base of the sunflowers. Now, this time of year is when everything just looks crazy and overgrown and in a way beautiful in its own way, but just doesn't seem as organized as it does earlier in the season. However, there's still lots of good things going on, but I am at that point where I'm starting to pull things out of the garden for good and prep the grounds for the fall. So you may see some of that craziness in these videos. And honestly, just because life has been so hectic the past month, I just haven't been out here tending things the way that I normally would, pulling weeds, pruning the way that I like to prune. But that being said, I've still had a lot of success with everything that I've grown in this garden, minus a few things. So let me just share where we are right now in this season, what I'm harvesting a lot of, what I'm pulling out, and what I'm preparing for. Honestly, it's just hard to walk through this garden now, the way things have been growing. If you've ever grown winter squash plants, you know that they have a tendency to take over everything. And thankfully, I had kind of prepared for that with this garden, because everything behind me here was basically the early spring garden. It has either been harvested or is on its way out right now. And pretty much all that's left in this space are flowers. I have lots of flowers springing up everywhere, which actually is great, given that there are so many weeds and a lot of things being pulled out. It's really lovely to have all the flowers kind of just landscaping this garden. So I've got more of my cut sunflowers over here. I've got the mammoth sunflowers that I've planted all over my garden. You'll see those all around the borders. I've got cosmos that have sprung up from last year, nasturtiums that I put all over, marigolds that I planted, here and there throughout the garden. So thankfully, those are really adding an element of beauty. As I kind of have a barren wasteland behind me where I've pulled out cauliflower and I've pulled out cabbage and I've pulled out all the potatoes, and I'm getting ready to pull out the Brussels sprouts, and I've pulled out onions and garlic. There's a few onions still left over here. I still have lots of kale and Swiss chard that are growing. Although I will say one of the things that I've really struggled with this season have been my brassicas. They have really been attacked by the caterpillars this year. And no matter how much I sprayed them with BT or pulled them off, they really just decimated a lot of my plants. And so I had a okay cauliflower harvest when you look at how many plants I had planted. So I didn't get as much cauliflower as I wanted, but I did get, a fair amount, which was exciting, because really this is my first year to ever grow and harvest cauliflower. And right I'm about to show you here is this Brussels sprouts patch. Last year I had so many Brussels sprouts, it was unbelievable. I mean, just tons and tons of Brussels sprouts. So this year I decided to not grow as many plants, and I'm kind of regretting that decision a little bit, just because these plants have been decimated by the caterpillars. They've just been really bad this year. And the other thing that made this hard was my kids participated in the 4-H county fair this year, which took me really away from the garden for a week, if not 2 weeks, actually, if not 3 weeks, given the whole scheme of that project. And it was during that time that the caterpillars really started to attack these plants, and I just couldn't be out here to maintain it like I wanted to. So I am honestly going to be pulling these plants this week and just giving them to the chickens and calling this a loss for the year. So kind of disappointing, but it's just honestly not worth, for me at this point, the time it's going to take to try to revive these plants when I have a lot of other things I'd rather focus on. So this is the big loss that I'm taking this year, is I won't be growing any of my own Brussels sprouts. And I didn't really get the cauliflower I was hoping to get, although I did get some. At the same rate, my kale has been kind of off and on the whole year as far as the caterpillars go. They've also been attacking my kale really bad. So I've had to really hammer these kale plants, and I have lots of them with the BT, the Monterey BT, and they always come back. They always spring back once I spray them or once I pull off those leaves that are really eaten. But like right now, they're looking really pitiful, but they will keep growing and last way into the fall if I can take care of them. But I'm also going to be starting some new kale, hopefully this week, just to have like a fresh start with the kale and the Swiss Chard, and see what I can't get to grow through the fall and into the winter. My Swiss Chard plants have been great. Thankfully, they are not as affected as the kale have been with the caterpillars. They're looking a little piddly right now, and I think that's just because we're needing some rain here. So I need to get this garden watered, and I've been trying to just cut off as much as the Swiss Chard as I can to kind of stimulate growth. And I've actually been dehydrating all those leaves that I've been harvesting and turning it into a super greens powder, which I can talk about maybe on my blog or another video. But we just can't eat that much Swiss Chard in a week. And so I've been dehydrating it and then grinding it into a powder that I'll use to add to soups and casseroles and smoothies and all different kinds of things. So, you know, definitely not a loss. We're just not eating all of it fresh because it's a lot. So here is just the massive, massive Three Sisters garden slash winter squash garden, and then into the cut sunflower garden. So I've said in other videos that I'm just not a fan of the Three Sisters garden for a number of reasons. Everything did really well. Everything grew really well. It's just as you can tell, trying to wade through all of this to harvest the corn and the beans was just not fun. I don't like to have to get in there. I feel like I'm stepping on all the vines, and I'll be honest, I feel like I just did not get from this the amount of beans that I got from my beans that are in their own little plot over there. So next year I will not be doing the Three Sisters garden. Now that being said, like I said, everything has grown amazing. Even though I had a squash bug infestation happen, everything is almost just sprung back to life. These squash plants are still growing really strong. I've got some in here that need to be harvested, some that are still developing. I'm gonna have a really nice, if all goes well, winter squash harvest this year, and that's really exciting. And I did harvest all of this sweet corn, I want to say 2 weeks ago. So I was going to do a video on it, but I actually lost my voice during the 4-H fair. So I did not have a voice for 2 weeks. And that's the other reason I wasn't able to do any videos, because I couldn't talk. So I really didn't get to get out here and show you the sweet corn that I got from this crop. But it was a great crop. It did really well. You really need a lot of corn plants to get the amount of corn that you might want to last you throughout the year. But we don't eat a ton of corn, so that wasn't really my goal. My goal was to do an experiment to see how corn did starting it indoors, and my verdict on that was it did awesome. If I grow corn in the future, which I'm sure I will absolutely start the plants indoors. That was by far the best. And the little corn plants that are coming up over here are the ones that I planted from seed in the ground. And they actually did pull through, but they are much punier. There are a couple stalks or corn husks on them I can see, but they're just much smaller, punier plants. And the squash just overtook them way too fast. And so planting these as seedlings was really the best way to go. So the corn did well. The beans did okay. Like I said, it was really hard to get in here and harvest them. So I did get a good harvest off of them 1 week, but really I'm just gonna leave the rest of the beans on here to dry, and I'll use those beans to plant next year. So it's not a total loss, it's just a fresh eating loss. So again, I'll just pull, when we come in here and clear all this out, I'm gonna pull off all those dried bean pods, and that's what I'll use as part of my seeds for beans next year. But look at these squash, you guys. They're enormous. This is an ultra butternut variety, and they are just huge. If they're not really long, they're really wide, and I have a ton of them. And in fact, I need to show you this one over here. It is just enormous. But everywhere I turn, there are butternut squash. Look at this one. Oh my gosh. Oops, I just broke this wild tomato vine. Look at that guy. He's huge. Huge. That's at least 18 inches long. Most of these are like 18 inches long and really, really wide here at the base. Another one behind me that's just enormous. And honestly, these are getting really close to being harvested. What I'm looking for is a yellowing stem here. Looking for that to start yellowing. And then when I put my fingernail into the skin, how easily does it pierce? Does it pierce really easily, or do I really have to dig my fingernail in there? That's how I can tell when these are ready to harvest. I just got a glimpse of this one, and I had to show you how big this thing is. I don't know if you could tell on screen, but this is probably, now I have very large hands, fairly long piano hands. This thing is probably, oh my gosh, 8 to 10 inches wide. Here, I don't even know, 14, 15 inches long. This thing is huge. It's unbelievable how big some of these squash are. I can't wait to harvest them. And my other squash that I grew this year, the Gete Okasamin, these things are enormous too. And really, these should be ready to pull any day now. Their stems have definitely started to brown and yellow, and their skin is getting harder. I'm just leaving them out here in the garden to cure. But I have lots of these squash out here, so I really just need to fine-tune my winter storage solution to make sure that they last throughout the winter. But if I cure them properly and I really give them a nice storage solution, these things will last up to a year. This one's ready to come off right now. And this is actually a small one in comparison to the other ones I have in the garden. Most of them are 18 inches to 2 feet long. And they turn this bright orange whenever they're ready to harvest. My cut sunflower garden has been really, really fun. I've harvested a lot of these flowers and ended up just using most of them for our own purposes, for decorations around the house. I've given them to friends and really just kind of blessed people around me. I haven't sold any of them because I really was just doing this as an experiment to see how this setup worked. And I've loved it. I will do this again. It was so easy. It was fun. It was great to come out here every week and have a whole new crop of sunflowers ready to harvest. I definitely recommend the Pro Cut sunflowers if you can get your hands on those. There's a really good price on them over at the Gardener's Workshop. They have some great collections and great prices on Pro Cut sunflowers. But I decided to leave these just because they're so beautiful and they're so awesome to look at from my house throughout the day. So I left these just for our enjoyment and then have been harvesting all the other ones to give to friends or bring in the house. So definitely love doing the cut sunflower garden, whether just for our enjoyment or for giving to friends or for eventually selling to people for bouquets. And then the really great surprise, the thing that did really well this year that I just didn't know how it would do, was the watermelon garden. So my husband said that every year there's always something that surprises me that does really well that I'm not expecting to do well, and something that doesn't do well that I'm not expecting to not do well. And that's been the case. You know, like I lost all my Brussels sprouts But man, we got an amazing watermelon harvest. And we're still harvesting a lot of watermelon. I think we've already harvested 12, 13, something like that. And I know I've at least got, gosh, probably 6 to 8 more in here. And I will tell you, the trick is knowing when to harvest them. Because even though I've followed all the rules of thumb, specifically like looking for that tendril right off the end to turn brown, sometimes you really need to look at, multiple factors to know if you have a ripe watermelon. I tend to look at the tendril at the end turning brown and thumping it and seeing if it sounds hollow. Because if the tendril is brown but it doesn't sound hollow, I have found that they are generally not ripe. So I try to wait, if I can, till I get that brown tendril and a hollow sound, and we have gotten some nice ripe watermelons by following that rule of thumb. Unfortunately, we've lost some by being either overripe or underripe. So this is a learning process. I have not grown a ton of watermelon in the past just because we haven't had the right temperatures or the right system. And what really worked this year here in Southwest Michigan was starting those plants indoors at the end of April and then planting them out. That gave them a really good head start to where that I could be harvesting them now at the whole month of August, being able to harvest and enjoy watermelon. So I really believe that was kind of like the key to being able to do this successfully, was starting them indoors at the end of April. So let me show you a couple more of these. This is actually a cantaloupe, and I haven't harvested these yet because they don't sound quite ripe enough. They might be getting there, but they sound kind of dense, and I just don't want to take the chance of taking it too early. And I've got another one somewhere in here that I need to harvest. And then here's another one of these black diamond watermelons that's starting to sound ripe. And here's the tendril right here that's now brown. See that? That's the tendril right off the end that you're looking for to turn brown. And then you can give it a thump or a pat. And to me, it just sounds too dense. I just don't think it's ready. So I already have some inside. I'm not going to harvest this one yet, but it is definitely close to being ready. And here's another example of a pretty much brown tendril right here. But to me, doesn't quite sound as hollow as it should. So I'm going to give this one just a little bit longer. And there's a few more back in here that I'm not going to try to get through all these weeds to get to, but we've definitely got some more back in here that hopefully we'll be harvesting here in the next week or so. And before I take you to the tomato and pepper garden, I thought I would just show you real quick, if you followed along at all this past year, this whole row right here was all of my potatoes. Well, half of my potatoes and all of my cabbage. And so all of that has pretty much been harvested. I have a couple little cabbages right there that I could harvest their side shoots, and I haven't done that yet. But basically this now turned into a cut sunflower and zinnia garden, which is amazing. So all of this color and all this beauty is viewable from the front of my house. So this just turned from one productive garden into another as the season wore on. And as I harvest these sunflowers, this is where I will re-amend these beds and put in the greens for the fall and winter garden. And really the same thing here. This is where I had a lot of cabbage and cauliflower and kale, and I've harvested almost all of that now. And there's a lot of weeds here that still need to be picked out, but this will be re-amended, and this is where some more of the greens will go for the fall and winter garden. So we're just kind of, I am just kind of prepping for that right now mentally. I'm just trying to get my timeline ready for getting those plants out here. It should be a lot less work and a lot less management, that fall garden, compared to the summer garden for sure. And then this is the crazy, what I call the hot season garden, where I've got all these tomatoes, which are now having trellises fall over, growing over the tops, very full of all kinds of fruit. We've been harvesting from this daily. In fact, I took 2 trayfuls of tomatoes to church this morning because I just wasn't able to put away all the fruit that these plants are bearing. So these plants have done really, really, really well. I'm really excited for the amount of sauce that I will hopefully be able to put back from these plants. And actually this week I'll be coming in here and topping all of these plants right here because really I need the energy from these plants to focus on the fruit that are on them. Since we're in late August, we only have about 6 more weeks of weather before the frost comes, and really just about 4 weeks of warm weather. So I want to cut these off here and allow the energy to focus on the fruit that are already on the vine. So all of these plants will be topped this week. I might leave the cherry tomato plants because they're just really prolific and they ripen so quick. It's not so much of an issue for those. But these ones that have the bigger fruits on them, all of this will be cut off this week so that all of that energy can go to making these beautiful fruits right here. Had a great harvest of celery, and there's still more to be harvested. That was super fun. I've never grown celery before, and it was actually super easy. And I got a ton that we already put back and froze. And then I will come in here, and whatever of these stems I decide I don't necessarily need, I can use them for stock. I can use these leaves for soups and for celery seed. This whole plant can be used for different things in the kitchen. So none of this will go to waste. And I really can just come out and harvest daily fresh celery from the garden. And then when I take those really big harvests, that's what I put in the freezer to last me throughout the winter. And then next to that, these were my leeks. And I've already harvested a bunch of these. They were beautiful and just smelled so amazing. These are the smaller ones that are left. I'm going to give them a little bit more time to grow. And I can also just come cut these fresh and use them right now. All the ones I cut this past week have been frozen, chopped and frozen, put in our freezer, so I can use them throughout the season. But growing leeks, multi-sown like this, that was a really fun and easy experience. These are all my herbs. I have had a great success with herbs this year. This is all oregano. I do not necessarily need all of this oregano, but I've been coming out and just taking regular cuttings of this and just drying them in waves so that I can just have a really good supply of dried oregano throughout the year. And also making some of these into tinctures, because oregano has a really, really strong, potent antibiotic, antiviral property to it. So having this as a tincture or an oil will be a really great thing to have on hand during the winter season. And then this is my lemon verbena that has just grown huge over this season. And this has been mainly because I've just come in here and continued to prune this. This has the most amazing scent in the world. I absolutely love, love, love the scent of lemon verbena and want to make soap and candles out of it. It just smells amazing. So making regular cuttings on this and drying it and using it as tea has really helped this plant just become prolific. And then down here, the rosemary and the thyme and the sage have kind of gotten shaded by this garden. And what's interesting is, even though this is a east-west garden, this northern side has definitely suffered as far as having enough sun exposure, whereas the southern side has sun exposure all day. So I will keep that in mind next year for those herbs that really like that sun, to keep them on the south side of these tomato rows, and then having the herbs that don't necessarily need the sun, or plants that don't need that full sun, going on the north side of these tomato trellises, because there's definitely a difference between sun exposure on the south side and sun exposure on the north side. Now, it hasn't really hurt them at all. They're just not as big as like what the plants are on that side. I still have tons of sage that I can harvest from, and thyme and rosemary. And obviously these plants have done really well. All these marigolds have just taken over here in the last month. I mean, they're huge. They're almost up to my chest as far as how tall they are. And I've been coming out here and harvesting these flowers and drying them to use for teas and oils and other things in our house. And actually, this is a great alternative to natural food coloring, or marigolds that you can use for food coloring. We have a daughter that has a very severe allergy to food coloring, so this is something that we can use in our home throughout the year and not have to purchase those natural alternatives. Sweet pepper row has really taken off. I've been getting peppers from this for a while now, but a lot of these bigger bell peppers are really starting to come in and take their color. Sometimes it's hard to wait and remember what color some of these peppers are supposed to turn. So I just make myself wait a week or so after they look like they're ready. And sure enough, they're starting to turn their really pretty colors of yellow and red. Here's one right here. And then these really interesting looking like neon yellow ones. I'm excited to see what these produce. I really think this will be like a bright yellowy green pepper. I'm not entirely sure, but there's gonna be way more peppers here than we can use. But what I like to do is freeze or dehydrate all those extra peppers. So instead of trying to use them all fresh, although I do like to do that, I like to chop them up and freeze them. That has been awesome to have peppers to access throughout the winter. I almost never had to buy peppers at the store unless I just wanted them for fresh eating. Dehydrating them and freezing them, because you don't have to blanch them, has been awesome to throw in all kinds of recipes throughout the year. And you can freeze them in strips if like you want to use them for like a saute, like a fajita or something like that. Peppers are really freeze well and are great to, if you have an abundance of them, to store away just like that. We've had an awesome bean harvest. I really like growing beans, bush beans. They do really well. They don't take up a lot of room and they're just so prolific. In fact, this is overdue for another harvest. We come out here and harvest just a ton every other day of beans. And really this patch right here is enough for our family of 7 to make us enough beans to last most of the year. In fact, I still have beans in the freezer from last year's harvest. So I really enjoy growing these bush beans, although I do love growing the pole beans over the arch trellis because it's just so fun to come and walk through and pick out the beans off those trellises. So I'll probably do some of that next year as well. But if you don't have trellising, bush beans are so easy, prolific, and really the way to go. And over here you can see these surprise pumpkins that I had come in. I have no idea how I planted this. This is not what I thought it was. I thought it was a zucchini plant, but this was a really fun surprise because we have at least these 3 and then 2 or 3 more of these in the other garden that popped up. So these will be our jack-o'-lantern pumpkins this year, which our kids are really excited about, that we didn't have to buy. We just grew them in our own garden. So that has been a really fun surprise. I have been harvesting broccoli. As you can tell here, these leaves have gotten decimated this past week by caterpillars. This has literally happened in just a couple of days. So I have to get out here and spray these tonight. It has been such a busy week that this has been overlooked. And if I want to get my broccoli harvest, these are my bigger broccoli plants, I've got to get these sprayed this week. And that is the goal, either tonight or tomorrow night, to spray these before I completely lose this whole entire crop of broccoli. Thankfully, I've been harvesting from these guys. This is the DeChico broccoli, and some of these are perfectly untouched, which is so interesting that how the bugs will attack some and not others. But I thankfully have been harvesting broccoli heads from these. It's just I won't get a good side shoot harvest if these plants are decimated like this. So that is super unfortunate. This has happened like within a day or two, which is unreal to me. So I have to come out and take care of these right now, or I'm going to completely lose this harvest. And the eggplants have really come in. It's been fun. I've got all kinds of eggplant in here. Purple eggplants, white eggplant, striped eggplant. I love eggplant. It's one of my favorite vegetables in the garden. I lived in Italy for almost 4 years, and eggplant was by far my favorite vegetable to eat there. That and broccolini. And so I'm really looking forward to getting these inside and using these in some recipes. And then last but not least, spicy pepper row here. There are so many peppers in here. It's unbelievable. And again, like, how do you use them all? Well, some of this was just leftover plants that I didn't want to throw away. And so I just planted them in the garden. So I'll be sharing these with friends or putting them on my sister-in-law's roadside stand. But there's just so many peppers in here. I won't be able to use all of them. So overall, a successful garden year. Like I said, I've really taken a beating with the Brassicas. As you can see, I'm about to lose my broccoli plants if I don't get out here and spray them tonight and stay on them for the next couple of weeks. There's just those years where some pests are just harder to manage than others. And this was that year for me, which is such a bummer because I really just haven't had success with Brassicas this year the way I have in the past. And you know, you win some, you lose some. So I'll try again next year. I'll definitely be moving my broccoli plants towards the fall garden and not so much the summer garden. I think that's really a big reason that I suffered such big losses is because those pests are really prolific during the warmer months and less so in the cooler months. So if I move these broccoli plants more towards now, having them out here growing now, I think I might experience less pest pressure, but that's just going to be another experiment to try for next year. So I'll keep you updated on how this goes. I have already harvested some, but I really am hoping to save those down there. This back here is my popcorn. So it is grown really nice, and I'm just letting this corn dry on the stalks so that we can harvest that for popcorn. And the tomatoes have just been absolutely unbelievable this year. And so I know that we'll have plenty of sauce and tomatoes to last us through the winter, which that was my goal. And so far, so good. And that was really, those and beans and peppers were like my main focus this year, and the medicinal herb garden. Now, that is gonna have to be a whole nother video. I've had so much fun with all my medicinal herbs and all the things I've been doing with them. So I will share that in a separate video because this one's already gone on long enough. But I just wanted to say hello again and show you everything that's been going on out here, and just getting ready to start again for the fall garden. So I hope you guys will stay with me and get your gardens going, or just have some ideas for what you can do here in the next year or even in the next month. So thanks so much for joining me and coming along for this little garden tour. Again, my name is Landon Gilfillan here at Pepper and Pine Garden Design, growing gardeners and their gardens, and I'll see you in the next video.